My name is Bertha, and I'm 68 years old. For 40 years, I've lived in my Manhattan apartment, a place filled with memories. Last month, my son Thomas sold it without my permission for $2 million. He handed me a check for $15,000 and told me to find a room in the outskirts. I laughed. The look on his face when he realized what I'd done was priceless. If you're curious about what happened, let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe to find out how I turned the tables on my own son. I wasn't always living in a $2 million apartment in Manhattan. My story began when I immigrated to America at 23, fresh-faced and determined. I arrived from a small town in England with nothing but 2 suitcases and dreams of building a better life. America represented opportunity, and I was ready to seize it with both hands. Teaching had always been my passion, so I pursued my certification and landed a job at a public elementary school in New York City. The hours were long, the pay was modest, but the satisfaction of shaping young minds made it worthwhile. I taught second grade for almost 40 years, retiring only when my arthritis made standing all day too painful. My husband Jack and I purchased our Upper West Side apartment in 1983. Back then, Manhattan real estate wasn't the inflated market it is today. We scraped together a down payment from our savings, took out a mortgage, and felt incredibly fortunate to own a piece of New York City. It wasn't luxurious by today's standards, a 2-bedroom with a decent-sized living room and a tiny kitchen, but it was ours. We lovingly renovated it bit by bit over the years, replacing the ancient appliances, updating the bathroom, laying down hardwood floors with our own hands. Jack passed away 15 years ago. Heart attack. No warning. One morning we were having coffee together. By afternoon I was a widow. The adjustment to life without him was brutal. For months I wandered around our apartment like a ghost, touching his things, sleeping on his side of the bed to catch the fading scent of him. But eventually, as grief does when you give it time, it transformed from a raging fire to embers I could carry. The apartment became even more precious to me, then filled with 40 years of memories. Our son Thomas was born 2 years after we bought the apartment. He was our only child, and we poured everything into him. Jack and I both came from modest backgrounds and worked hard for everything we had. We wanted Thomas to have opportunities we never did, but we also wanted him to understand the value of hard work and kindness. In the early years, Thomas was a sweet, thoughtful boy. He would bring me wildflowers picked from Central Park and draw cards for every occasion. Jack taught him to play baseball in the park, and I helped with his homework every night. We weren't wealthy, but we managed to provide a stable, loving home. As Thomas grew older, something shifted. Maybe it was the private high school we sacrificed to send him to, where he was surrounded by classmates from much wealthier families. Maybe it was natural teenage rebellion. Whatever the cause, our sweet boy became increasingly fixated on money and status. By the time Thomas graduated from college, he was almost unrecognizable to me. He took a job on Wall Street, bought expensive suits, and moved to a luxury apartment. Jack worried about him, but I kept making excuses. He's young, I would say. He'll figure out what really matters. Thomas married Jessica 10 years ago. She was beautiful, polished, and came from money. From our first meeting, I sensed she viewed me as quaint at best and embarrassment at worst. She would make subtle comments about my clothes, my accent, the modest way we lived. Jack never warmed to her, saying she had dollar signs where her heart should be. I scolded him for being judgmental, but privately I shared his concerns. Despite Thomas's 6-figure salary, he and Jessica always seemed to be struggling financially. Their lifestyle was extravagant, with luxury cars, designer clothes, and vacations to exclusive resorts. Jessica never worked, claiming her job was maintaining their social connections. When they bought a $1 million house in Connecticut, I was stunned. How could they afford it? Thomas brushed off my concerns, saying I didn't understand modern finance. The first time Thomas mentioned my apartment's value, Jack was still alive. We were having dinner together, and Thomas casually remarked that our apartment must be worth a fortune now. Jack changed the subject immediately. After he died, these comments became more frequent. Thomas would send me real estate listings for similar apartments that had sold for astronomical sums. "Mom, do you have any idea what you're sitting on?" he would ask. "You could sell this place and live like a queen in Florida or Arizona." I always responded the same way. "This is my home, Thomas. I have no interest in living anywhere else." He would shake his head as if I were being stubborn or irrational, but I had built my entire American life in this apartment. Every corner held memories. The door frame with pencil marks tracking Thomas's growth, The living room where Jack and I danced on our anniversary. The window seat where I graded papers for decades. How could I possibly leave? In retrospect, I should have seen what was coming. The signs were all there, little breadcrumbs leading to betrayal. But when it's your own child, you make excuses. You see what you want to see. And I wanted to see the sweet boy who once brought me wildflowers, not the man who was plotting to sell my home out from under me. The first real red flag appeared about a year after Jack's death. I came home from grocery shopping to find a business card tucked in my door from a real estate agent. "Lovely to meet you today. Looking forward to our next conversation about your property," it read. I had never met this person or discussed selling my home with anyone. When I called Thomas about it, he dismissed it casually. "Oh, those agents are always fishing for listings, Mom. Just ignore it." A month later, I received a call from another agent claiming Thomas had given them my contact information. "He mentioned you might be interested in downsizing," the agent said cheerfully. This time I confronted Thomas more directly. He sighed as if I were being difficult. "I was just doing some market research, Mom. You know, in case you ever decide to sell. It's called being prepared." "Prepared for what?" I asked. "I have no plans to sell my home." "You're not getting any younger," he replied, his tone condescending. "Eventually you'll need assisted living or some kind of care. That's just reality." I was 65 at the time and in excellent health. I walked 3 miles in Central Park every morning, volunteered at the library twice a week, and took Spanish classes at the community center. The suggestion that I needed care was absurd. Around this time, Jessica's attitude toward me shifted from mild disdain to something more calculated. During their infrequent visits, I would catch her scanning my apartment with appraising eyes. "It's such a waste," she said once, running her hand along my bookshelf. "All this space for just one person." "I use every inch of this apartment," I replied. "My book club meets here, I host dinner for friends, and I need my office space for my volunteer work." Jessica exchanged a look with Thomas that made my stomach knot. It was the look of people who have already made decisions about you without your input. 6 months later, I was browsing online news when a real estate listing caught my eye. The photos looked strangely familiar. It took me a moment to realize I was looking at an apartment identical to mine in the same building. The listing price was $2 million. I felt physically ill reading the description: rare opportunity in prestigious pre-war building. Needs updating but perfect for creating your dream Manhattan home. Someone had been in my apartment taking measurements and photos. Someone had been planning this without my knowledge. The next time Thomas visited, he brought up assisted living again. "I've been researching some really nice places, Mom. Beautiful facilities with activities, medical staff on site, other people your age." "I'm not interested," I said firmly. "This is my home, and I'm perfectly capable of caring for myself." Thomas's expression darkened. "You can't live here forever. It's not practical." "Why not? I can afford the maintenance fees. I have friends nearby. My doctors are here. Why would I leave?" "Because things change, Mom. You need to be realistic." A week later, Thomas called with what he presented as a brilliant idea. "The apartment needs some updating, Mom. Why don't you stay with Jessica and me for a few weeks while we get some work done? New kitchen bathroom renovation, maybe some fresh paint." I hadn't complained about anything needing renovation. "That's very thoughtful but unnecessary. Everything works fine." "It's no trouble," he insisted. "I've already talked to some contractors." The red flags were waving frantically now, but I still couldn't bring myself to believe my own son would go behind my back to sell my home. Then came the moment that finally opened my eyes. During a Sunday visit, Thomas left his briefcase in my living room when he went to the bathroom. Something compelled me to look inside. Maybe it was intuition or self-preservation. Among his papers, I found a document titled Power of Attorney. My name was on it, along with what appeared to be my signature giving Thomas full control over my financial decisions. But I had never signed such a document. My hands shaking, I used my phone to take photos of the papers before returning them exactly as I'd found them. When Thomas and Jessica left, I called my old friend Eleanor, who had been an attorney before retiring. She came over immediately. "Bertha," she said gravely, after examining the photos, "this is very serious. This appears to be a forged power of attorney document. With this, Thomas could legally sell your apartment without your consent." The floor seemed to drop beneath me. "But that's not possible. He's my son." Eleanor took my hand. Elder financial abuse often comes from family members, people you trust. We need to act quickly. That night I barely slept. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I'd ever felt. My own child, the boy I had raised and loved, was attempting to steal my home. But beneath the hurt, something else was emerging: determination. I would not be a victim, not even to my own son. Instead of confronting Thomas immediately, Eleanor advised me to gather evidence and prepare a counter-strategy. If you tip your hand too soon, he might accelerate his plans, she warned. Let's build an ironclad case first. I began documenting everything. Every strange phone call from realtors, every comment Thomas or Jessica had made about my apartment, every unusual visit or request. I wrote down dates, times, and exact wording as best I could remember. Eleanor connected me with a friend who specialized in elder law. The attorney, Barbara, reviewed my case and confirmed my worst fears. With a power of attorney document, even a fraudulent one, Thomas could potentially sell your property. Financial institutions and real estate agencies don't always verify thoroughly, especially if the documentation appears legitimate. What can I do? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. First, we secure your actual legal documents. Do you have the deed to your apartment? I did, locked away in a safety deposit box Jack had insisted we get years ago. Jack always said important papers should be kept at the bank, not at home. Your husband was a wise man, Barbara said. We'll need to check exactly how the property is titled. Next, Barbara advised me to set up secret cameras in my apartment. If Thomas is bringing realtors or potential buyers into your home without permission, we need evidence. The thought of spying on my own son made me physically ill, but I agreed. A technician friend of Eleanor's installed tiny cameras in my living room and kitchen positioned to capture anyone entering the apartment. The first footage I reviewed broke my heart. While I was at my weekly doctor's appointment, Thomas used his key to bring in 3 people wearing business attire. He showed them around my home as if it were already his to sell. My mother is starting to decline mentally, I heard him say on the recording. She'll be moving to a specialized care facility soon. We're looking to sell quickly. I watched this stranger, who looked like my son, point out my outdated kitchen and old-fashioned bathroom that would need complete renovation. He suggested knocking down the wall of my office, the room where I'd graded papers for decades, to open up the floor plan. One of the visitors asked, "And your mother is on board with the sale?" Thomas smiled smoothly. "I have power of attorney. She trusts me to handle her affairs now that she can't manage on her own." I shut off the video, my hands shaking with rage and grief. The mental decline he spoke of was completely fabricated. My last physical and cognitive assessment had shown I was in excellent health for my age. My doctor had even commented on my impressively sharp memory. Barbara advised me to get an official evaluation from a geriatric specialist to document my cognitive health. We'll need this to counter any claims Thomas makes about your mental capacity. I also consulted with my bank and discovered Thomas had attempted to access my accounts using the forged power of attorney. Fortunately, the bank had required additional verification, which had temporarily halted his efforts. I immediately placed security holds on all my accounts and changed my passwords. Perhaps most valuable was Barbara's suggestion to check my building's bylaws. Every cooperative apartment building in New York has its own rules governing sales and transfers. Barbara found a clause in mine that would prove crucial. Any sale of an apartment to a non-resident required approval from the co-op board, even with a power of attorney. Your building has unusually strict rules about sales, Barbara explained. The board can reject buyers for almost any reason, and they're particularly protective of long-term residents. I'd served on that very board for 6 years after retiring and had always maintained good relationships with the other members. Thomas, on the other hand, had managed to offend several board members during his infrequent visits, treating the building staff with condescension. Armed with this knowledge, I met privately with the board president, Howard, a retired judge who had lived in the building even longer than I had. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered and explained the situation. Howard was outraged. "This is elder abuse, plain and simple," he said. "The board will never approve a sale under these circumstances." With my documents secured, my mental competence officially documented, my financial accounts protected, and the co-op board alerted, I felt ready for whatever Thomas might try next. The betrayal still stung bitterly, but now I had a plan. As painful as it was, I had to acknowledge that my son was no longer the person I thought he was. The sweet boy who brought me wildflowers had become a man willing to throw his mother aside for financial gain. I needed to protect myself even from my own child. The full extent of Thomas's betrayal became clear on a Tuesday afternoon. I had told him I had a doctor's appointment, but I actually returned home early and found him in my apartment with a couple who were clearly potential buyers. I stood silently in the hallway listening as my son sold them a story about his poor mother's mental decline. "She gets confused easily now," he was saying. "Some days she doesn't recognize me. It's been hard, but the facility we've chosen has excellent memory care." Every word was a lie. Every single word. I quietly slipped out before they noticed me too shocked and hurt to confront him in that moment. I walked to Central Park and sat on a bench for hours trying to process the depth of his deception. This wasn't just about money anymore. Thomas was systematically dismantling my identity, painting me as incompetent and incapable to justify taking control of my life. The next day, I received a call from my bank's fraud department. Someone had attempted to transfer a large sum from my account using a power of attorney document they flagged as suspicious. When I visited the bank in person, they showed me the document. It was the same one I had found in Thomas's briefcase, but now it had been officially submitted. My signature had been forged on multiple pages. I provided samples of my actual signature, and the bank manager agreed they didn't match. They immediately placed additional security on all my accounts and recommended I file a police report for identity theft. That evening, Thomas called. "Mom, we need to talk about next steps," he said, his voice artificially cheerful. "I found a great assisted living place in New Jersey, very affordable." "Why would I need assisted living?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Mom, we've discussed this. You're having memory problems. Remember last week when you forgot about our lunch date? We had never had a lunch date. He was gaslighting me, creating a false reality to justify his actions. I think I'd like to talk to my doctor before making any decisions," I said, playing along to buy time. "I already spoke with Dr. Peterson," he lied smoothly. "He agrees this is the best option for you." Dr. Peterson had been my physician for 15 years. I knew with absolute certainty that he would never discuss my health with Thomas without my explicit permission. The final blow came 2 days later when I saw my apartment listed for sale online. $2 million. The listing included interior photos taken without my knowledge and a description that mentioned estate sale and bring your renovation ideas. The real estate agent was someone I'd never met or authorized. I called Thomas immediately. "Why is my apartment listed for sale?" There was a pause before he answered. "Mom, we talked about this. You agreed it was time to downsize." "I never agreed to sell my home," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You did, Mom. You're just forgetting. This is exactly why we need to get you into a place with proper care." His voice was patronizingly patient, as if speaking to a child. "I want you to take down that listing immediately." "It's already in process, Mom. We've accepted an offer." He sighed heavily. "This is for your own good. The apartment is too much for you to manage now." When I protested further, Thomas put Jessica on the phone. "Bertha," she said coldly, "you need to be reasonable. You can't keep up with a place this size at your age. The stairs, the cleaning, the maintenance. It's time to downgrade to something more appropriate for someone in your situation." "And what situation is that?" I asked. "You're elderly and on a fixed income. The money from this sale will ensure you're taken care of for the rest of your life." Taken care of. As if I were a burden, a problem to be solved. When I hung up, I sat in my living room surrounded by the life I'd built and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. My son had become a stranger to me. Whatever motivated him, whether it was greed, his wife's influence, or financial desperation, he had chosen money over his own mother's well-being and autonomy. I cried that night, mourning not just the potential loss of my home, but the loss of the relationship I thought I had with my son. Then I dried my tears and called Barbara. It was time to implement our counter-strategy. What Thomas didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that I was 2 steps ahead of him. While pretending to reluctantly accept the idea of selling, I had been working with Barbara on what she called the nuclear option. First, we discovered something crucial when we examined the original deed from my safety deposit box. The apartment was solely in my name, not jointly owned with Thomas, as he had claimed to the real estate agent. Jack and I had transferred the property entirely to me before his death, as part of our estate planning specifically to avoid complications. Second, my documented mental evaluations clearly showed I was competent to make my own decisions. The narrative Thomas was creating about my cognitive decline was demonstrably false. Third, Barbara found that the forged power of attorney had technical flaws that made it invalid. In New York State, a power of attorney document requires specific language and witness signatures that Thomas's forgery lacked. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, the co-op board was firmly on my side. Howard had called an emergency board meeting where they unanimously agreed to reject any sale attempted through Thomas's fraudulent power of attorney. With these pieces in place, Barbara helped me file a petition for an elder abuse restraining order against Thomas. We also prepared documentation for the district attorney's office regarding the forgery and fraud. Then we contacted the real estate agent directly. Barbara and I visited her office unannounced, bringing copies of the deed showing I was the sole owner, medical documentation of my mental competence, and evidence that the power of attorney was forged. The agent, Allison Parker, was horrified. "I had no idea," she said repeatedly. "Mr. Williams assured me everything was above board." "He lied to you," Barbara said bluntly. "My client never consented to this sale, and any attempt to proceed constitutes elder abuse and real estate fraud." Allison immediately agreed to withdraw the listing. "I want no part of this," she said, visibly shaken. "I'll contact the potential buyers right away." But Barbara wasn't finished. "We'll need copies of all communications between you and Thomas Williams regarding this property. There'll be evidence in the fraud case." "Fraud case?" Allison paled. "Yes," I said, speaking up. "I'm pursuing charges against my son for attempting to sell my property without consent." The words felt like glass in my mouth, but I forced them out. Thomas had left me no choice. Next, we set our trap. I called Thomas and told him I had reconsidered and was ready to discuss the sale. "I'm just concerned about where I'll live," I said, making my voice sound small and uncertain. "I don't think I can afford anything in Manhattan with what's left after you take your share." "Don't worry about that, Mom," Thomas said, relief evident in his voice. "I've got it all figured out. Jessica and I will come by tomorrow to go over the details." The final pieces were in place. Now all I had to do was wait. The next day, Thomas and Jessica arrived at my apartment carrying empty boxes. "We thought we'd help you start packing," Thomas announced. "The closing is in 2 weeks." I sat quietly at my dining table where I had positioned one of the hidden cameras for a clear view. 2 weeks. That seems very fast. "The buyers want to move quickly," Thomas said, setting down the boxes. "They're paying cash, which simplifies things." Jessica wandered around, eyeing my furniture critically. "Most of this is too dated for your new place. We should donate it." Thomas pulled a check from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table in front of me. "Here's your portion of the sale. $15,000. I stared at the check. 15,000, but you said the apartment sold for $2 million. "Well, there are a lot of expenses, Mom," Thomas explained condescendingly. "Real estate fees, transfer taxes, capital gains, and then there's the 30% I'm setting aside for your care facility." "And you're taking the rest?" I asked quietly. "I'm managing it for you," he corrected. "You're not capable of handling large sums anymore." Jessica interjected. "Plus, we've already put deposits down on some investments. High return potential." I picked up the check, examining it carefully. $15,000 to restart my life. "And where exactly am I supposed to live on this amount?" Thomas shrugged. "We found some rooms for rent in Queens, basic but functional, or there's a senior housing complex in New Jersey that has vacancies." "Go buy yourself a room in some dump in the outskirts," Jessica added bluntly. "It's more than generous, considering you haven't contributed anything to this family in years." I hadn't contributed. I'd only raised their son, supported his education, babysat their children countless times, always remembered their birthdays with thoughtful gifts, even when they frequently forgot mine. "When do I need to be out?" I asked, maintaining my facade of defeat. "The buyers are coming by tomorrow to measure for renovations," Thomas said. "We'll need to have your essentials packed by then. The rest can go into storage temporarily, though, as Jessica said you should consider donating most of it." "And what about my friends, my book club, my volunteer work at the library?" Thomas waved dismissively. You'll make new friends. There are libraries in New Jersey. As they continued discussing my future, as if I weren't present cataloging which of my possessions were worth keeping and which should be discarded, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was overshadowed by a cold clarity. This person was not the son I raised. The Thomas I knew would never treat another human being this way, let alone his own mother. "Are you sure the sale is final?" I asked innocently. "No chance of the buyers backing out. 100% done deal," Thomas assured me. "I've signed all the paperwork on your behalf. Everything's legally binding." "On my behalf? How did you manage that?" "I have power of attorney," he said, a flicker of impatience crossing his face. "We've been over this, Mom." Right, right. I nodded. "And the co-op board approved the sale." "They didn't have a choice," Thomas said smugly. "With the power of attorney, I have full legal authority." Jessica was examining my jewelry box. "Is there anything valuable in here? Family heirlooms we should secure?" "Just costume jewelry," I said. "Though there is a safety deposit box at Manhattan Savings Bank with some of your grandmother's pieces." Thomas's head snapped up. "Safety deposit box. You never mentioned that before." "Didn't I? Senior moment, I guess." I smiled faintly. As they continued their inventory of my life, deciding what had value and what was dispensable, I sat quietly with the $15,000 check in my hand. After a while, I began to laugh. Thomas frowned. "What's so funny?" I shook my head, still laughing. "You have no idea what I've done." Jessica and Thomas exchanged worried glances. "What are you talking about?" Thomas demanded. "Nothing," I said, suddenly composed. "Just a little joke to myself. I think I need to rest now. Tomorrow is going to be a big day, isn't it?" Looking uncertain. Thomas and Jessica gathered their things. "We'll be back first thing in the morning with the buyers," Thomas said. "Try to be ready." After they left, I called Barbara. "They took the bait," I told her. "Everything's recorded. Thomas explicitly admitted to signing documents on my behalf using the forged power of attorney." "Perfect," Barbara replied. "All the pieces are in place for tomorrow. How are you holding up?" I thought about it for a moment. I'm sad and angry, but also relieved that this will soon be over one way or another. That night I looked through old photo albums tracing Thomas's face from babyhood through childhood and into adulthood, trying to pinpoint when I had lost him. Had the seeds always been there? Had Jack and I somehow failed him as parents? Or had the world's values corrupted him, teaching him that money matters more than people, more than family, more than basic human decency? I didn't find answers, just memories of a little boy who once loved his mother, and a painful contrast with the man who now saw her as nothing more than a financial obstacle. In the morning, I dressed carefully in one of my nicest outfits, made coffee, and waited for the confrontation that would change everything. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Thomas, Jessica, and a well-dressed couple I assumed were the buyers. Standing behind them, exactly as planned, were Barbara Howard from the co-op board and Officer James Rodriguez from the NYPD Elder Abuse Unit. Thomas's face registered confusion, then alarm. "Mom, what's going on? Who are these people?" "I believe you know Barbara, my attorney," I said calmly, "and Howard from the board. Officer Rodriguez is here to discuss the fraudulent documents you've been circulating." The couple looked between us uncertainly. "Is there a problem with the sale?" the man asked. "There isn't going to be a sale," I stated firmly. "I never authorized it. My son forged documents to try to sell my home without my consent." Jessica's face contorted with anger. "That's ridiculous. Thomas has power of attorney." "Tell them, Thomas." Barbara stepped forward. "The power of attorney document in question is a forgery. We have expert testimony confirming the signature is not Mrs. Williams's. Furthermore, we have video evidence of Mr. Williams admitting to signing documents on his mother's behalf without authorization." Thomas's face drained of color. "Mom, you recorded our conversations. Your own son." "I recorded someone committing fraud in my home," I corrected him. "Someone who happens to share my DNA." Howard addressed the buyers directly. "As president of the co-op board, I need to inform you that we never approved this sale. Our bylaws require board approval for all sales, even those conducted with a valid power of attorney, which this was not." The buyers looked stunned. "We were told everything was in order." the woman said, glaring at Thomas. "We've already given notice on our current apartment." "I'm afraid you've been misled," Barbara said sympathetically. "You may want to consult your own attorney about recourse against Mr. Williams for misrepresentation." Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, we need to discuss these allegations of elder fraud and forgery. I'd like you to accompany me to the station to answer some questions." Thomas looked desperately around the hallway as if seeking an escape route. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted. "My mother is confused. She agreed to the sale, and then forgot." "That's not going to work anymore, Thomas," I said quietly. "I've been evaluated by 3 separate specialists who have certified my mental competence. The only person creating confusion here is you." Jessica rounded on Thomas. "You said this was legal. You promised everything was handled properly." It is. Thomas was starting to sweat visibly. "Mom, please don't do this. We can work something out." "Like the $15,000 you so generously offered me from the $2 million sale of my home?" I asked. "Was that your idea of working something out?" The buyers were backing away. "We want nothing to do with this situation," the man declared. "Our attorney will be contacting you, Mr. Williams." Officer Rodriguez placed a firm hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Sir, we need to continue this conversation at the station." "You can't be serious," Thomas sputtered. "She's my mother. This is a family matter. Financial elder abuse is a criminal offense in New York State," Officer Rodriguez replied evenly, "as is forgery and attempted fraud." As Officer Rodriguez led a protesting Thomas toward the elevator, Jessica stood frozen, her designer purse clutched to her chest like a shield. "Jessica," I said, drawing her attention, "I think you should leave now." She stared at me with naked hatred. "This is your fault. All of it. You could have just taken the money and gone quietly, but you had to make a scene." "I had to protect myself," I corrected her, "from my own family. Think about that." After everyone had gone, I sat in my living room feeling strangely hollow. The confrontation I had been dreading was over. My home was secure. Justice was in process. But there was no joy in any of it, only the dull ache of a wound that would never fully heal. Barbara stayed with me making tea and talking through next steps. "The district attorney will likely pursue charges based on the evidence we've provided," she explained. "Thomas is facing serious consequences, potentially including jail time." Jail. The word felt like a stone in my throat. Despite everything, the thought of my son behind bars was painful. "Financial elder abuse is taken very seriously now," Barbara said gently, "and the forged power of attorney elevates it to a more severe category of offense." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I just never imagined things would come to this." "You did what you had to do," Barbara reminded me. "He left you no choice." That night alone in the apartment Thomas had tried to steal from me, I cried for the son I had lost, for the family that was now irrevocably broken, and for the painful truth that sometimes those closest to us can become our greatest threat. The aftermath of that confrontation unfolded gradually over the following months. Thomas faced multiple charges: forgery, attempted fraud, and elder financial abuse. The evidence against him was overwhelming, from the video recordings to the forged documents to the testimony of the real estate agent and potential buyers. Initially, he tried to fight the charges, claiming I had verbally agreed to the sale and then changed my mind, but his story collapsed under scrutiny, especially when the prosecutor presented evidence of his other financial misconduct, including attempted unauthorized transfers from my bank accounts. The co-op board voted unanimously to ban Thomas from the building, citing safety concerns for other elderly residents. They even took the extraordinary step of amending the bylaws to strengthen protections against similar situations in the future. Jessica filed for separation 2 weeks after Thomas's arrest. According to mutual acquaintances, she claimed she had known nothing about his illegal activities, though the recordings clearly showed her active participation. When their financial situation collapsed under legal fees and the loss of Thomas's job, she quickly departed. For me, the hardest part was not the legal proceedings, but the emotional aftermath. I joined a support group for victims of family financial abuse and was shocked to discover how common my experience was. So many elderly parents betrayed by children they had raised and loved, so many lives disrupted by greed and entitlement. Through the support group, I formed new friendships with people who truly understood what I had endured. We met weekly, sharing stories and strategies for healing. Gradually, I rebuilt a social circle based on genuine connection rather than obligation or blood ties. I also found purpose in advocacy work. With Barbara's encouragement, I began speaking at senior centers about financial protection and the warning signs of elder abuse. I volunteered with a legal aid organization that helped low-income seniors secure their assets and understand their rights. "You've turned your pain into purpose," Eleanor told me one day as we walked through Central Park. Jack would be proud. I believed she was right. Jack had always valued resilience and standing up for oneself. He would have been heartbroken by Thomas's actions, but would have approved of how I handled the situation. 6 months after the confrontation, Thomas's case was resolved through a plea agreement. He received a suspended sentence with strict probation terms, mandatory financial counseling, and community service hours at a senior center. The judge also ordered him to repay all the money he had taken or attempted to take from me, plus cover my legal expenses. I had mixed feelings about the outcome. Part of me wanted Thomas to experience more severe consequences for his actions, but another part was relieved he wouldn't go to prison. Despite everything, he was still my son. A month after the sentencing, Thomas asked to meet with me. Barbara advised against it, concerned about my emotional well-being, but I decided to hear what he had to say. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop near Barbara's office where she could intervene if necessary. Thomas looked diminished somehow, his expensive suit replaced by casual clothes, the arrogant confidence gone from his posture. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, "I don't know how to begin to apologize." "Then don't," I said simply. "Just tell me why. I need to understand why you were willing to throw me away for money." He stared into his coffee for a long moment. "I told myself it was for your own good, that you needed care, that the apartment was too much for you, but that was just justification. The truth is, I was drowning in debt. Bad investments, Jessica's spending, trying to keep up appearances." He looked up, his eyes wet. "But that's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did to you." I nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting his explanation. "What will you do now?" "Start over. Get help for my issues with money. Try to become someone I'm not ashamed to be." He hesitated. "Do you think we could ever... would you ever be able to forgive me?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. I considered it carefully before responding. "Forgiveness isn't a single moment, Thomas. It's a process, and I'm not there yet. You betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible. You were willing to leave me with nothing to erase my autonomy and dignity for your financial gain. That's not something I can simply forget." His face fell, but I continued. "However, I don't hate you. You're still my son, and part of me will always love you. But rebuilding trust, if it's possible at all, will take time and consistent effort on your part." We parted with no promises, no dramatic reconciliation, just a fragile understanding that the path forward, whatever it might be, would be long and uncertain. In the years since that conversation, Thomas has respected my boundaries. He sends cards on holidays, and my birthday makes monthly restitution payments as ordered by the court, and occasionally emails updates about his life. I respond with brief, polite messages, neither encouraging nor discouraging further communication. The most important lesson I've learned through this ordeal is the value of self-advocacy. For too long, I made excuses for Thomas's behavior, ignored red flags, and prioritized family harmony over my own well-being. I believed that maternal love meant endless sacrifice and acceptance. Now I understand that true love, including self-love, sometimes requires setting boundaries and allowing consequences. By standing up for myself, I not only protected my home and financial security, but also gave Thomas the opportunity to face his actions and potentially become a better person. My apartment remains my sanctuary, filled with memories both painful and precious. I've made some updates, painting the walls brighter colors and rearranging furniture to create a space that feels renewed while honoring the past. Each morning, I still walk in Central Park, volunteer at the library, and meet with friends for coffee or book discussions. My life continues altered but not diminished by what happened. In some ways, I'm stronger now, more confident in my ability to protect myself and advocate for my needs. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Thomas. Perhaps with time and effort, we'll find a way back to some version of family, Or perhaps the damage is too deep, the breach of trust too severe to ever fully repair. Either way, I've found peace in knowing that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to value me properly, not even my own child's. If you're facing a similar situation with family members pressuring you about your home or finances, please know you're not alone. Trust your instincts, document everything, and don't be afraid to seek professional help. Your age doesn't diminish your right to make your own choices and control your own assets. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure about your living situation? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you feel less alone, please subscribe to hear more stories about navigating difficult family dynamics. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to advocate for yourself.